Elena Vasquez never talked much. That was the first thing anyone noticed about her. She walked quietly through the halls of Mercy General Hospital in San Diego, kept her eyes forward, spoke only when she needed to, and always sat near the door, in meetings, in the break room, in briefings. Some people thought she was shy, others thought she was cold. Nobody thought to ask her why. She had been working at the hospital for just over 2 years. In that time, she had earned the respect of her patients, who always asked for her by name. She had earned the quiet loyalty of the other nurses on the floor, who noticed that she never made mistakes, never panicked, and never left a patient waiting. And she had earned something else entirely from the man who ran the surgical wing, Dr. Harlan Voss. His dislike of her began small, the way most damaging things do. It started with a comment during her second week on the unit. She had been charting patient notes and was slightly slower than the digital system required, because she was double-checking every entry. Dr. Voss passed behind her, glanced at her screen, and said to the resident standing beside him, "Some people should stick to general care floors." He did not lower his voice. He did not look at her when he said it. He walked away as though she were furniture. She said nothing. Over the months that followed, his remarks became a pattern. During surgical briefings, he would wave a hand when she tried to speak and say, "Let's not go to Vasquez. We'll lose 20 minutes. He once told a group of new residents, loud enough for the entire nurses' station to hear, that certain personalities were simply not suited for high-pressure environments, and that spotting them early was part of good clinical leadership. Everyone in earshot knew who he meant. He moved her to the worst shifts, holidays, overnight stretches, the long weekends, when the unit was short-staffed and exhausting. He kept her out of complex surgeries she was fully trained and qualified to assist with. He wrote 2 formal performance reviews that described her as emotionally unsuitable for high-acuity care. When the HR office processed those reviews, no one flagged them, because Dr. Harlan Voss had 17 years of seniority, a wall full of awards, and the kind of reputation that made people hesitate before questioning him. Elena filed no complaints. She told no one anything. She simply kept coming in, kept doing her work, and kept sitting near the door. What nobody at Mercy General knew, what she had never once mentioned, was that before she became a nurse, Elena Vasquez had spent 6 years as a Navy corpsman assigned to a special operations unit. She had deployed 3 times to Afghanistan and once to the Philippines. She had kept gravely injured men alive in the field with her hands and her training while waiting for rescue that sometimes took over an hour to arrive. She had received the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with a combat VI device, awarded for her actions during a firefight in Helmand Province in 2013. The quiet, the door, the flinching at sudden loud noises, these were not weakness. They were the footprint of something she carried home from places most people would never see. She was managing it, on her own, the same way she had managed everything, steadily, without asking anyone for help. The morning that changed everything began like an ordinary shift. It was mid-October, and the emergency department was busy with the usual rhythm of a trauma center. Elena was 3 hours into her rotation when the ambulance bay doors opened, and a stretcher came through, carrying a man named Marcus Webb, a former Navy Chief Petty Officer who had been in a serious motorcycle accident on the interstate. He had broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a deep cut on his left forearm that had reached the bone. He was conscious but in significant pain, and he was trying to say something to the paramedics that none of them could quite follow. What he was saying was, "Do not separate me from my dog." The Belgian Malinois named Brego had been a military working dog before Marcus retired from service 6 months earlier. The two had served together through 3 combat deployments. When Marcus separated from the Navy, the dog had been retired into his care. They had not spent a single night apart since. Brego had ridden in the ambulance. He was now standing in the bay, not aggressive, not out of control, but completely unwilling to move, his eyes fixed on Marcus, his body between the stretcher and everyone else. He was not barking, he was simply present in a way that made grown men take a step back. Animal control had been called. The attending physician was trying to begin his assessment. The bay was caught in a standoff that nobody knew how to break. Elena walked in. She did not rush. She did not raise her hands in the way people do when they want to appear calm but are actually nervous. She simply walked to where Brago was standing, lowered herself slowly to his eye level, and began to speak to him. Not commands, not coaxing, something quieter than that, a low, even murmur that came from a person who understood, in her body and not just her mind, what it felt like to be in a high-alert state in a chaotic environment and to be responsible for someone you loved. The dog looked at her. Within 90 seconds, Brago pressed his head into her hands. Within 2 minutes, he was walking beside her to a quiet corner of the bay, where he lay down next to a security officer and stayed there, calm and watchful, while Marcus was taken inside. The entire ambulance bay had gone still. Paramedics, nurses, the attending physician, everyone had stopped what they were doing for just a moment to watch. Then work resumed, because work always resumes. But people remembered. Inside the treatment room, when Elena came in to assist with Marcus's care, he looked at her from the exam table and said, "Through the pain, where did you serve?" She paused. She looked at him. Something passed between them that did not need explanation. She told him. He nodded slowly. He told her that Brago had been trained for years, never to approach strangers the way he had approached her, that the dog had something handlers sometimes tried to describe, and never quite could, a sensitivity to something in people who had been through combat environments. Brago did not comfort unfamiliar people. He recognized something in Elena that the hospital had never thought to see. He knew, Marcus said. He always knows. When Marcus's wife arrived that afternoon, he introduced Elena to her and said simply, "She's one of us." Marcus Webb was not a man who forgot debts. After he was discharged, he began asking quiet questions. He spoke to other nurses. He spoke to the surgical resident who had watched Dr. Voss dismiss Elena in front of an entire team during a procedure review. He spoke to the hospital's charge nurse, a steady, careful woman named Deanna Flores, who had been watching the situation for over a year. What Deanna told him was something she had never told anyone in an official capacity, because she had not known where to bring it, and because Dr. Voss was powerful in a way that made people afraid to be the first one to speak. But she had been writing things down, dates, times, exact words, a private notebook she kept in her locker, 14 months of careful documentation, because she believed that records mattered, even when you did not yet know what to do with them. Marcus listened to all of it. Then he did 3 things. He went to the hospital's patient advocacy office and filed a formal report, describing what he had witnessed personally and what he had been told by staff, and specifically noting that the treatment appeared to be directed at a veteran who showed signs of a service-related condition. He contacted the county Veterans Affairs liaison, and he called a friend who was an employment attorney, who listened carefully and advised Deanna Flores to submit her notebook to the hospital's Human Resources Department as a formal complaint. She did so the day after Thanksgiving. The investigation that followed was careful and thorough. HR cross-referenced Deanna's documented dates against security footage, scheduling records, and the hospital's electronic charting system. Everything held up. 3 other nurses submitted voluntary written statements. 1 surgical resident did as well. Dr. Voss's 2 negative performance reviews of Elena were placed beside her actual patient outcome data. 0 reported clinical errors in 2 years, satisfaction scores that ranked her among the top 3 nurses on the floor, and peer evaluations that were consistently positive. The investigators noted in their report that the performance reviews could not be reconciled with any objective clinical standard. Then Elena was called in for her own interview. She brought a folder that had been sitting in her bag for 2 years, unopened at work, because she had never believed it would be welcome there. Inside was her full service record. The HR director read through the medal citation, the one that described what Elena had done in a field in Helmand Province in 2013, the specific actions, the lives affected, the conditions, and she was quiet for almost a full minute before she looked up. Dr. Harlan Voss was placed on administrative leave in December. The investigation concluded the following February. Its findings were clear: a sustained pattern of workplace harassment, discriminatory treatment based on perceived psychological vulnerability, and deliberate professional harm directed at a single employee. The report further noted that Dr. Voss's comments about Elena's emotional suitability, comments made to residents, to other nurses, and recorded in official performance documents, took on additional legal weight given her veteran status and her documented service-related condition, placing the hospital in serious legal exposure under California employment law. He did not return from leave. His surgical privileges at Mercy General were revoked. A referral was made to the state medical board. During the review process, an investigator located a complaint from a female resident at a hospital where Dr. Voss had worked years earlier. A complaint that had been handled quietly at the time and buried. It was no longer buried. His attorney released a short statement on his behalf. Dr. Voss said nothing publicly. There was, at that point, nothing useful left to say. Elena was offered a formal apology by the hospital's chief medical officer. She requested that the meeting be kept private. She was promoted to charge nurse of the surgical unit 6 months after the investigation closed, a role that her colleagues noted she had been ready for long before anyone thought to offer it. She continued to work with a therapist at the VA, more consistently now, on a schedule that felt manageable, rather than like another thing she had to force herself to carry alone. She still sat near the door. She still did not talk much. These things did not need to change. They had never been flaws. Sometime in the spring, a photograph arrived in the mail at the hospital, addressed to her. It was Marcus and Brago, both of them recovered, healthy, standing on a beach somewhere north of the city. The dog's ears were up and his eyes were bright, and Marcus was smiling the way people smile when they have come through something difficult and know it. On the back of the photograph, Marcus had written 4 words and signed his name. She kept the photograph in the same folder where she used to keep her service record. The folder no longer needed to hide.